Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I built these two nightstands with built-in wireless charging as well as a cord management system in the back to keep things clean and organized. Let's get started. Since the focal point of the design is the leg structure, that's what I worked on first. Since I don't have a miter saw, this is normally where you see me rough cut the lumber down on my table saw. But Graph recently contacted me and asked if I was interested to try out a product called the Speed Cutter, which is a blade specially designed for cutting, grinding, and sculpting wood using the angle grinder. While I only used it for this operation, I can say that the cuts were really smooth and made it really quick for me to break down the lumber before I squared up the faces and then milled them down to about an inch thick. Let's talk about the leg assembly real quick. The assembly consists of two tapered horizontal pieces that are connected to a longer vertical piece using bridle joints. Here you see me cut 15 degrees off of both ends of the vertical pieces to get that backwards lean I was looking for. Next, I laid out the tapers on the horizontal pieces going from 2" down to 1". I then used these lines to set up my tapering jig to make the cut. The taper pieces then all received a 15-degree cut on the wider end to match the vertical piece cut previously. And with all the parts cut, I drew layout lines for the mortises in the tapered pieces. Then finally I made the cuts at the table saw using my tenoning jig. By stacking the dado blades slightly narrower than the width of the mortises I'm cutting, I only had to line up the blades with one side of the layout lines, because once I flip the part over to make a second pass, the mortises will end up centered on the part. Next, I laid out the tenons on the vertical piece and then transferred this angle to my miter gauge at the table saw. I left the tenons slightly thicker and longer so that I can clean up the saw marks and flush things up later with hand tools. I'd like to take this moment and say a quick thank you for checking out this video, and if you're enjoying it, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of my future projects. It really goes a long way in helping me to further grow this channel. Next, I put a 45-degree miter on the ends of all the horizontal pieces. It would have been much easier to do this before the glue up, but I forgot. And with the leg assembly completed, I turned my attention over to making the cabinets. While I'm breaking down the plywood here, let me explain the design real quick. The cabinet case is just a basic rectangular box with miter joints, made from 3/4" ply with hardwood trim glued around the edges, pretty much like what you've seen me do before. But what's different is that the back is made from a piece of 1/2" ply that sits about 1.5 inches inboard from the back edge. This extra space allows me to mount and hide a power strip and a cable organizer. After I flushed up the hardwood edge banding and trimmed the boards down to their final dimensions, I cut the 45-degree miters on the ends of the pieces. Here, you see me laying out and cutting the dados on all four sides that will receive the aforementioned 1/2" ply. Next, I glued up the bottom panel to the two sides. I used dominoes to help me with the glue up and some right-angle clamps to keep things square. While the glue was curing, I measured for it and cut the 1/2" back piece and glued that into the dados. Before gluing up the cabinet top, I used my CNC to carve out the pocket for housing the wireless charger. While the machine did its thing, I applied finish on the inside and installed the drawer slides, which are much easier to do with the top open, especially for a small cabinet like this. After the CNC was done carving, I inserted the charger into the recess and attached it using some hot glue. Next, I drew out the side profile of a cable organizer and indicated the areas where materials will be removed. In the end, what I'm left with should be a 3D extruded version of the 2D profile I just drew. If you want to make something like this, I highly recommend using the micro jig grippers. The legs of the jig provide support for the piece no matter what orientation I'm making the cuts, so it'll make the cuts very stable and safe. And if you're interested in checking them out, I've got links to them in the descriptions below. Next, I laid out and cut the slots where the cables will rest. You'll see me make multiple passes at each layout line. This is because the gaps needed for the cable is much wider than the curve of my blade. And finally, I attached the cable organizer block to the bottom side of the top panel with some glue and clamps, and then I glued the panel to the rest of the cabinet. After the cabinet has been glued up, I used some scraps around the shop to lift the cabinet up to a height that I liked, and then mark the dados on the legs for securing the cabinet in place. At the table saw, I raised the blade to match my layout lines and put a stop on the fence to keep my cuts consistent for all the legs. With the dados cut, I did a quick dry fit so I can measure and cut for the top and bottom shelves. The shelves are attached to the legs using dominoes, which are positioned so that the top shelf sits about a 1/4 inch below the top edge of the leg assembly. Here, I'm adding a small bevel along the edge of the leg where the top shelf attaches to. With the bulk of the structure completed, I glued the legs and shelves to the cabinet, and all that's left are the 2 pieces of trim that goes on the back of the top and bottom shelves, which you see me cut and attach here. After the glue has dried, I sanded the whole thing down and applied finish to the nightstands. And while waiting for the finish to cure, I began building the drawer boxes, which are made from 1/2 inch ply for the sides with dados cut into them for receiving a piece of 1/4 inch ply for the bottom later. To install the drawer boxes, I used a piece of 1/4 inch ply as a spacer to lift up the box and then screw in the male end of the slides into the sides of the box. Next, I began to make the recessed drawer fronts. I've got a kid who's about to start crawling anytime now and soon start walking. To make things a little safer for the kid and easier for myself in terms of baby-proofing the house, I decided to not use any drawer handles. Instead, I just cut a simple bevel into the top of the drawer front where my fingers can grab onto. And the very last thing I did was hang the charging station on the back of the cabinet. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this build, and if you liked it, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my latest videos. If you'd like to see more content from me, give me a follow on Instagram at Bevelish_creations, link in the description below. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.